Meet is now live.
All right, we are live and right on time.
Yes. So,
All right, so it's 3 o'clock. Let me see if Wendell is coming in. Do y'all see Wendell in the participants? Okay. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and get started. All right, y'all, it's 3 o'clock. Y'all know what time it is. Thank y'all for joining us today. We're having a little bit of technical issues, but we got them resolved. So welcome everybody. It's Tuesday, 3 o'clock. So that means it's a State of Your Business weekly webinar with the Fort Worth Metropolitan Black Chamber of Commerce. My name is Denise, and I am the Membership Service Director for the Chamber. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce my coworker, Daryl Brewer. Hello, Daryl. Thank you for being here today.
hello, Denise. Glad to be here. Hello, everybody.
Wonderful. All right. So I just want to mention that if you are not a part of our chamber, if you're not a member of our chamber, please let me know. And if you're interested, we have our website. It's www.fwmbcc.org. And on there, you'll be able to see a little bit more about what we do. You'll be able to do an online application. You can pay online, all that. If you have any questions about membership, if you're not really sure what level you should do, just let me know and I can help you with that. That's what I'm here for, to help. So just a quick reminder that tomorrow, if you are a new member or you've joined in the past couple of months and you haven't been to a new member orientation, our new member orientation is on the last Wednesday of the month. It's once a month, last Wednesday of the month at 3 o'clock. They are virtual. So there is a registration link for you all. I've sent it out through email as well as it's on our Facebook. So that also brings up, if you are not part of our mailing list, do make sure to be a part of that, because we send out weekly updates, and we also have monthly newsletters with all kinds of great information, not just on us, but of our chamber members and our community, upcoming events, things that are happening. So if you want to be in the know, just make sure to subscribe to our newsletter, as well as follow us on social medias. Our social media handles is FW Black Chamber. So make sure to go follow us. And we are currently on Zoom and live on Facebook. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to my coworker, Daryl, to start the program.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daryl Brewer, the Economic Development Manager for the Fort Worth Metropolitan Black Chamber of Commerce. And I'm happy that you tuned in with us. And today, I think we have a really exciting program. If you are a WMBE, if you're a contractor, if you have a business where you want to expand your business by working together, partnering with another business, this is the opportunity for you to get the information that you need. We are partnering with Texas A&M Law School here in Fort Worth, Texas. And so today, our leader for this program is going to be Professor Neil Newman. He's a professor at law at Texas A&M Law School. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Neil so he can take it from here. Neil?
Thank you, Daryl. I appreciate the introduction. And it's nice to meet everyone out there in the virtual world. It's always an adjustment with doing things virtually. I just know there's 46 participants out there. So hello to everybody. It's great to meet you all. I'm excited to be here along with my colleague, Billy Magnuson. So I'll start with getting this disclaimer out the way. This is what they tell us to do at the law school. So let me get with this disclaimer. While some of our panelists are attorneys, they will be discussing the law generally, and nothing in the webinar should be considered as legal advice. Attendees should consult their own legal advisor to address their own unique circumstances. So with that out the way, I'm going to sort of pull up my quick intro. So our webinar today our topic, minority and women-owned business enterprises and the joint venture, leveraging for more opportunities and bigger engagements. So just so you know, this is the brainchild of Mr. Brewer, who approached us and said, you know, we want to provide and make this information available to our members, and we want to get them familiar with, exposed to how joint ventures work generally. And Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the construction contract business, and I'm thinking it's going to have applicability to other areas as well. But broadly speaking, we're looking at how we put these joint ventures together so that we can leverage opportunities for bigger engagements. So that's the big picture there.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how we're going to do this, I'm going to start with introducing the panelists. I think you all are familiar with Daryl, but I wrote up something for him too, but I'll be quick on that. And our keynote speaker, if you will, is going to be Wendell Stimley. He's going to give an overview of the joint venture contracting process. Like we said, we've got Daryl here to keep an eye on everybody to make sure we're on point with the messaging. And we also brought Billy in for the law school to talk about legal issues in the joint venture context. So we've got action-packed, fun-filled our program for you. And depending on where we are when we get to the end, we'll have some time for some Q&A. So you can send your questions in through the Q&A. We'll be keeping an eye on them, and we'll go from there. So just quickly, our panelists, our keynote, if you will, that's Mr. Wendell Stimley, who is the CEO of Black IPO Inc. Over a span of 2 decades, Black IPO Chief Executive Officer Wendell Stimley has built a successful enterprise and worked to establish, maintain, and grow key business relationships between corporations and minority and women-owned business enterprises for mega construction projects nationwide, totaling more than $500 million to date. Black IPO is an engineering and construction management firm that Wendell founded in 2000, so he's been at this for over 20 years. The San Diego-based firm offers construction management, design phase management, cost control systems, and contract administration for primes and general contractors across the country. In recognition of Mr. Stimley's long and illustrious career in this industry, the National Association of Minority Contractors inducted Mr. Stimley into the 2014 class of the National Association of Minority Contractors Hall of Fame. Like I said, you already know Daryl, but I'm gonna introduce him anyway, just in case. All right, Daryl. As many of you are already aware, Mr. Brewer is Economic Development Manager of the Fort Worth Metropolitan Black Chamber of Commerce, a position he assumed in February of 2019. A U.S. Army and Army National Guard veteran, Mr. Brewer holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Business and Communications from the University of Texas at Arlington. He's done continuing education work in sales at various seminars around the country. Mr. Brewer is an entrepreneur and business owner in his own right as the owner of Magic Car Wash and Detail right here in Fort Worth, Texas. His business was the Editor-in-Chief's Choice Award winner for the best car wash presented by the Fort Worth Weekly magazine. Finally, we have Professor William Magnuson. Billy is a professor of law at Texas A&M University School of Law, which is located right here. All right, I'm not keeping up with my slides. All right, all that coordination. All right, there's Billy. All right. Billy joined the law school in 2016 and specializes in business and transactional law. Billy received a JD from Harvard University School of Law and his undergraduate degree from the University of Princeton. So I'm very pleased to introduce our 3 panelists. And at this point, let's see, do we have our keynote back online yet?
I think I see Wendell in the participants. We can add him on.
He's getting back on.
Before we
now.
okay.
It's a little slow, but coming.
Okay. So if any of y'all have done any of these webinars, you know stuff's going to happen technically. So we just roll with it and keep it rolling. And we hope to have Wendell up here shortly.
I do not see him anymore. I try to add him, and he's not in our participants anymore.
In the meantime, we're going
Oh, yes.
Okay, I think he's coming in now. So Denise, you're ready with his helping with the technical support?
Yes, I am.
All right, Wendell, you're with us. I see you're on. Can you unmute and pull your camera up?
I'm unmuted.
You're
and
unmuted. You're good.
My camera should be up. Okay.
Okay,
Here we go.
fantastic. All right, well, welcome, Wendell. We've introduced you and gave you all the hype and everything. So,
Oh, okay.
so now time for you to do your thing. So
All
Denise
right.
she's got your presentation ready to go. So you have the floor, Wendell.
Okay, well, we're gonna divert a little bit. First, I'll give you the overview of construction joint ventures. We're gonna spend some time on talking about partnerships based on the size and scope of some of the companies involved. I think it'd be good for us to talk about some issues that may not be in the $100 million range. We'll bring it back some and talk about what the everyday construction company trying to do a teaming agreement or joint venture might go through. So a joint venture is a partnership. It is forming a new company between two existing entities. It's important you understand that you have your independent company, you are agreeing to do a joint venture with another firm, either larger or smaller than your company, to increase your capacity to compete for a particular project. Once you form that new corporate entity, it becomes a company in and of itself. It has its own federal tax ID. It has its own partnership tax return, has its own K-1, has its own Secretary of State filing, and you have to treat it as that entity that is separate and apart from your existing company. The advantage of doing that is usually the two firms come together. One firm may have more financial capacity and another firm may have more political capacity in a local region. So international firms and out-of-state firms use this technique a lot when they're coming into new markets to do business because they have someone familiar with the lay of the land in that local marketplace. So you're sharing the risk, you're sharing the ownership, you're sharing the profit, and you have to consider you sharing the loss if that project goes sideways. So it's a share ownership of profit, loss, risk, and responsibility, and governance to oversee the joint venture. You want to make sure you have a management committee that runs the joint venture that is comprised of independent partners from both companies. There's usually a managing partner in a joint venture. A lot of what we've been seeing is a lot of joint ventures. There's a threshold. You don't want to enter into a joint venture to do 2%, 5% type. It's too much legal entanglement to take on that amount of risk for a small amount of participation or a small amount of return. You usually want to at least have a threshold of 20% ownership stake in any joint venture that you do. And this is how that would play out. Say you have a $50 million project and you have an 80-20 joint venture. Well, the managing partner of that joint venture would own about $36 million of the production required to complete that project. The minor partner with the 20% would then own $9 million based on the completion of that project. And you have to look at the general condition costs of doing the job. And then once you are able to get past that, you look at the potential profit, and the majority firm in most cases, if you're able to do about 5%, 10% would receive $4 million, and the minor firm would receive $1 million. I'm seeing a lot of cases nationwide where a lot of the minor firms are leaving their profit potential in the joint venture and not seeing the true return on investment, because a lot of times they are not taking on the value-added responsibility of managing the joint venture, meaning you have to manage the audited financial statement. You have to manage the economic process of the financial reports so that you have a clear, precise understanding of exactly the financial condition of the joint venture and the profit margin that could be expected. To divert a little bit, this is the importance of it. In our local communities right now, we need every prevailing wage job that we can get our hands on. Construction is 30% of the United States economy, 30% of the employment base. African Americans make up of 15%, but they are only capturing 7% of the employment. In contrast, the Latino community's 15% is producing 31% of every worker that works in construction on a daily basis. So as we bring more jobs back to the local community, and in our business, prevailing wage jobs at a minimum of $43 an hour. So we need as many of those $43 an hour jobs back in our community, because time after time on television, we're seeing that our young men and women are getting in very difficult situations, and it's usually due to transactions less than $100. So it's a social obligation as much as a moral obligation for us to grow these companies to a level of capacity to where they can affect their local communities with employment, because we have the quickest process to go into the middle class of any industry in the country. You can actually get trained in 18 months and be in the middle class employment base of $43 an hour, $75,000 to $100,000 a year, and we can do this in 24-month time period. We have to drive home that as we are looking for opportunity for the companies also have to be looking for opportunities for the vendor, suppliers, subcontractors, diverse workforce development that allows us to build out some of these jobs.
Mr. Wendell, I was wondering if you would like me to pull up the PDF.
You can. I mean, if you can follow with me. The different types of partnership agreements that you would have the managing partner agreement. The partner agreement, you want to make sure the value-added commercial use or function of the MWBE is a percentage of ownership of profit, and that he and she has covered all of the potential confidentiality and liability to be in this particular transaction. An important part of it you want to go to is the confidentiality agreement. You do not want to enter into a joint venture and have your partner actually, you've helped him or her get the opportunity at Google or Facebook or Exxon, and then you are there for one or two projects and they end up being there for 5 years. So you have to make sure that you have good legal representation and that you are actually a partner in the development of that project. You can go to slide number 5. Yeah, that's fine. As we mentioned, you want to have the financial reporting intact. You want to have your joint venture tax return so you can assess your liability. Next slide. For the owners that are supporting diversity, it is very important. We have 2 components. We have a RFQ, which is a request for qualification, which then usually drives for a number of questions in the request for information. And then we put out a RFP, which is a request for proposal. Now, a owner might say, I am looking to achieve a certain percentage of participation, or I'm looking to economically enhance a particular community. One project we're working on is the George Lucas Museum in Los Angeles. It was very important to George Lucas and his family that they did economic involvement around the USC campus. So sometimes the requirements will drive us to have to reach out into that local community and provide vendor supplier workforce development opportunities. Any owner in this business climate has to bring a responsibility to the economic interests of the local community. One thing I've definitely noticed over the past 6 months is that no matter who I talk to, capitalism and a disgruntled democracy can't exist in the same place at the same time. For all of us to be able to benefit and enjoy the fruits of our labor, capitalism has to have harmony in a democracy. So when you see someone that's trying to get in a training program, trying to get a leg into the process, make it your responsibility as an owner, as a prime, as a subcontractor, as a vendor, as a supplier, to try to get as more folks engaged as possible. Then that makes the whole economic ecosystem work. Because if we leave people outside with no opportunity, and we walk by them every day and they don't see a way to make it themselves, they will disrupt capitalism because it can't happen if there doesn't have consistency and fairness in democracy. So we'll go to the next slide. Increasing the capacity of your team. A lot of people, we're gonna cut to the chase and have a real talk here because I think we got real folks online. So you hear a lot of conversation about capacity and access to capital. Okay, here's how construction works. It's a business in and of itself. The number one access to capital that you have in construction is the contract in which you hold in your hand. We are amazed at managers as the number of vendor suppliers and small business that never come to the owner's team or the construction manager and say, hey, what items have you guys already cost out with different vendors and suppliers so that you can get the same pricing that we're getting. If we're gonna buy 1 million yards of concrete from a supplier in town, we've already set a price with him for that large purchase. If you come to us, you can tap into that and say, hey, I wanna use your pricing or the project pricing for the scope of work that I have. So many times, I think the smaller the company is, they just want to be on the project. They're not looking at it as a business. You have to say, well, if you guys have a batch plant and you're manufacturing concrete for $58 a yard, why should I go buy it for $118 in a retail account? That logically doesn't, even if you win the job, you're losing. So you don't want to do that. You want to take advantage and ask the questions, never be too proud to ask for assistance and say, hey, look, if you guys have this batch plant or you have a special purchase initiative, let me be a part of that, which then will reduce costs to our owner and reduce your costs and make you more competitive and more profitable. So get all of the prepays that we have on the project. That's access to capital rule number one. Access to capital rule number two, we got a mobilization payment from that owner of some amount of money, 10 million, 15 million, whatever the number of dollars. We also are amazed as the number of small business and minority and women-owned business that never come to us and ask for mobilization. They get on the project, they are running low on cash flow because they never put into their agreement even a request for mobilization. So you have to look at the contract is the quickest way for you to have access to capital and know how to request it and then be able to utilize that capital for completing the project. Thirdly, Texas, believe it or not, is one of the few states in America that does not have a pay when paid clause. Nevada, Texas, California, there is no such thing as pay me when you get paid by the owner. You submit an invoice, you should have a clear understanding with that prime contractor, with that owner, when you expect to be paid for the work that you have put in place. If that work is signed off by that inspector or signed off by that project team, you should be in a reasonable amount of time able to expect payment. A lot of what I see, a company might come in from Canada, a company may come in from New York, they happen to be building a project in your state, and you end up on that particular project. They have rules in the contract that are from New York, but you have not even challenged the fact that pay when paid is not an option in your particular region. So all these factors of having a good construction attorney and being able to understand access to capital without going to the bank, it's a low margin business. If you start borrowing too much money at too high of an interest rate in a low margin business, you're not gonna be successful or profitable because you're borrowing money higher than the profits that you're making. So keep that in mind. Hopefully use some of those techniques and have access to capital, which will increase your capacity in this business of doing construction. Delivery methods that a lot of owners like to use, they have what you call bid bill. You just turn in a bid. Design bill is a more complicated process. It may require you to team up with a design firm that has the design capability. You have to be very careful doing design bill contracts, because that means if you don't know that designer very well, intimately, every mistake he or she would make on those drawings or in those specifications, you end up absorbing the cost for that. Everything in the owner's eye, and the more complicated the owner is, the less likely you are to get a change order, because everything is not a change order. If you omitted it, a lot of owners feel that you own it. So be very careful doing joint ventures or teaming agreements that get you into design build contracts where you don't know the designer very well and he or she's capability. When you give a person a guaranteed maximum price for a contract, Disney likes to use these guaranteed maximum price. That means you go in, you look at Grand California Hotel or the Terminator 2 ride attraction or whatever you want to call it, and you say, I can build this in the time frame allotted and I can do it for $82 million. Well, guess what? At June 15th, when they open the theme park, you better have that ride attraction ready, and it better not cost $1 over $82 million. So all of your subcontractors, vendors, and suppliers are on the same hook that you are for meeting those deadlines and meeting those obligations. And based on the delivery method you use, you eliminated any change order or any accelerated payment based on a guaranteed maximum price. So as you start putting these deals together, what I see a lot of smaller firms have to do, especially when we get to big infrastructure projects where the jobs are like $1 billion. The primes are not willing to divide those contracts up into smaller portions, as the DBE firms or NWBE firms may be looking for a contract of $5 million. Well, it's very difficult to have bid packages and get down to that level to speak to competing for a package that's small. So now you might have two companies coming together to form a teaming agreement or a joint venture, depending on the complexity of the transaction, that they want to go after being a part of this $1 billion Interstate 10 expansion. The requirement from the owner may say, you have to own, not rent, not go get, own 50 trucks to be part of this process. So you got guy number one on one side of town, he has 25 trucks, and the guy on another side of town has 25 trucks, but neither one of them can meet the requirement. That's when you usually see companies forming a teaming agreement to bring the 50 truck capacity to the table so we can legitimately look at them in the competition. So as you are assessing who to team with, why to have a teaming agreement, you want to look at what is driving that agreement from the owner's perspective. Is it a capacity issue? Is it a financing issue? Is it a bonding issue? What issue is bringing about this teaming agreement so you both totally understand and you both totally have bought into that process? You don't want to duplicate. One guy might have all the hazmat certifications. There's no need for the other guy to go spend the money to get the same certification that the other teaming partner have. You want to come together and be able to marry the talent of both companies into a teaming agreement that would allow you to meet the minimum requirements by the owner to be considered for that particular subcontract. So that's the main issue of why people have to do joint ventures, teaming agreements, and things of that nature. Is usually a requirement that was driven by an owner down to that team, and singly they did not meet the requirement, or they didn't meet it strong enough to feel that they could win the competition. So they would then bring in this partner, and between the two of them, they're like, okay, we can go after this, we can be competitive. And you got to know what dump sites we have already entered into contracts with. That's why you have to stay in constant communication with the owner's representative. You don't want to be driving all the way to Fort Worth and the projects in Arlington, when the project team is driving around the corner doing the same process that you are, but because you didn't ask the questions and become signatory to utilizing these prime locations, you're at a disadvantage. How much time I have?
It's your call, Wendell, but we did get a question from the audience.
Sure.
Sometimes we were talking about joint venture agreements, but then you started talking about teaming agreements. Are you using those terms interchangeably, or is a teaming agreement something different than this joint venture agreement you're talking about?
A lot of smaller firms are under $10 million will use teaming agreements because the cost and complexity of using a joint venture agreement to accomplish the same objective is kind of cost prohibitive. Usually when you get into joint ventures, they are projects 10 million, 100 million, 500 million. People have done them for projects under 10 million, but you don't see that a lot in our industry. So the reason we're using different terms is that when you're talking with the smaller firms, you may be talking more of a teaming agreement. When you're talking to the larger firms over $10 million, you're talking more of a joint venture, just because they want to have a way of legally protecting their interests at all times.
Okay. Appreciate that clarification.
So Wendell, that's still a little foggy for me. This is Daryl. And so I heard you say under $10 million, but is the legal, and anybody else on the legal side can join in, is the legal formation different between a team and a
most definitely. In a teaming agreement, there is only one company that is the prime contractor. He is the lead company. He is teamed with a smaller firm. It could be a diversity consultant. It could be an outreach person. It could be a lot of different components of a teaming agreement and why they would enter into that. But ultimately, they are the ones entering into the contract with the owner. They are the ones taking the risks and the management of the risk. They are putting up the payment and performance bonds singly, and they are reaping most of the profit from that teaming agreement transaction. And they bring in sub-consultants or subcontractors that team with them that might go to the interview, might be part of the performance evaluation, but they are not in a ownership state. In a joint venture, the entity, the corporation, Texas Live Builders. Well, Texas Live Builders could be 2 or 3 major firms that have legally started this company for pursuing the business we know as Texas Live.
But are you saying that the teaming agreement is not a legal entity?
It's a legal entity, but there is one company that is the prime.
Okay, but what about, so what we were primarily looking at, you gave a great example of someone that needed 50 trucks to go after a particular contract, and you got 25 at company A and 25 at company B to come together to go after this particular, let's call it dump trucking, hauling type of contract. And
Right.
So is that a joint venture or is that a teaming agreement?
That's more of a teaming agreement. You wouldn't want to, some of the joint ventures we have done, the legal fees and doing them have been in excess of $30,000 to $50,000. So you wouldn't want to spend that type of money just to do a teaming agreement when the objective is to get the capacity of one guy with some trucks to married with another guy with some trucks, and they team together to pursue a subcontract.
Great. So that's why I'm here to help us focus where we were. Remember, we're looking at most African-American businesses have less than 10 employees. And so it's the idea of getting those two companies have 10 or so employees or 20 employees together to go after a particular venture. So I was using the term joint venture as a umbrella to cover whenever two or more entities come together to go after a particular deal, to qualify a deal. And if a teaming agreement is a more applicable term, okay, fine. But what does that look like? Is that just really a partnership agreement?
Yeah, no knock on anybody, but that commonly people use the word joint venture very loosely because it's a term people have heard and they understand that term. But really what's happening when you do a lot of small transactions are done really in teaming agreements, not in joint venture agreements.
Okay, so
joint venture agreements are more.
Yes, I understand. And I know that's where you sounds like you spend a lot of your time, but I really want us to hone in on the teaming agreement then. What is included in a teaming agreement? What makes that happen? So if we got most of our people who are looking in and who will be looking at this, they're going to be looking at teaming agreements. That's where we really want to be clear to get that information to our people.
Okay, well, let's go to the slide labeled teaming agreements. Scroll down. There we go. Okay. A teaming agreement is basically a lot of times a prime contractor or another company which acts as a subcontractor to a prime. And they team with the prime for the hope that they will be included if the prime is successful in being part of his team once that prime contractor pursues that particular project. The smaller company wants access to the contract. That's really what they want. They want to be the drywaller. They want to be the trucking company. They want some piece of that project, and they are going to that prime contractor early on and saying, hey, I want to be part of your team. I'm going to give you a good price. I do good work, et cetera, and for you to consider me in doing that. The thing that the smaller firm has to do versus waiting on a promise from its teaming partner is get a memorandum of understanding agreement with the teaming partner that if you are successful in pursuing this competition, that my MOU is valid as far as the numbers I gave you, the proprietary information I gave you, the value engineering that I gave you at no cost to help make you successful in this competition. So when you talk about teaming agreements, a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with the issue of diversity and inclusion, you might have a consultant that is exclusively working with one particular teaming partner. That means he or she is lobbying the governmental entities and the project owners on the issue of diversity and inclusion that this team will bring to the table if XYZ prime contractor is successful. But that in itself does not make them an owner of the company that they would be teaming with. That's why it's not a joint venture, because joint ventures focus on ownership, not inclusion or not utilization, if that clears it out.
So Wendell, just to clarify that point, so what these teaming agreements in terms of the financial part, which probably is the most key part, whereas in the joint venture, you're splitting the profit and the loss, if there is a loss, in some type of designated percentage. But it seems like in these teaming agreements, It's simply going to be sort of a contractual arrangement where the subcontractor is just paid a certain amount for.
Exactly.
That's specified in the contract.
Exact. They get a fee.
Okay.
Win, lose, or draw based on whatever the agreement between the prime teaming partner and the subcontractor or subconsultant may be.
Okay.
Which
think
kind
that
of
helps
protects
too.
them on the downside, but it kind of limits them on the upside. But at least they don't have the risk. We've done some jobs where I've seen guys really get hurt. I mean, guys have had to come out of their pockets millions of dollars to finish some of these projects. A smaller company wouldn't want to take on that type of exposure or liability. In a teaming agreement, they wouldn't. We're pretty much saying for your diversity, your outreach, your painting company, your utilization as a local business with the proper local historically underutilized business certification, that we're going to engage with you for $300,000 contract at a fee of $20,000. Anything else is our problem. You don't have to worry about it.
Okay, well, that makes sense, because you're talking about, like you said, it's more of kind of a big brother, little brother program, so to speak, in colloquial terms. But I'm thinking more of where the two entities are more like almost equal. And so to me, that maybe what we're really talking about might be considered a partnership agreement. So if we're going to decide, two businesses decide, hey, we're going to go after that contract, and this is what we're going to do. So maybe it's more a partnership agreement. So let's say if it's a landscape situation with a major municipality, whatever, and I'm good at cutting yards and that sort of thing, but somebody else might be good at installing sprinklers.
Correct.
And so we come in together. So maybe it's more valid to say we're going to do a partnership agreement to make that happen, as opposed to a joint venture or a teaming agreement. Is that true?
Well,
would you agree
the
with
good
that?
thing about the teaming agreement, it gives you enough flexibility to have it be a partnership agreement based on the two firms being equal size. You wouldn't have the big brother, little brother scenario. You would more be in agreement that you own 12 tractors, I own a sprinkler company, we're going to go in and pursue this work. The contract is $7 million. We're going to put equal bond, equal capital in place and go pursue that competition. But then it becomes, are you pursuing it as a prime contractor, or based on the owner, are you pursuing it as a subcontractor to a bigger project that might have hardscape involved, putting in a drive, a toll road, that could be other factors that won't allow you to compete for it as a joint venture prime. You would have to then compete for it as a teaming agreement or partnership subcontractor.
I got you, understand. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I want to give us an opportunity to get to some questions from the audience. Is that okay, Neil?
Absolutely. Well, they've been sending questions in all along. That's where I've been kind of getting my questions from. We got a question from Alex, and Alex wants to know, can a woman, small minority-owned business entity have a teaming agreement with more than one prime contractor, ? Or is it exclusive to one prime contractor?
Most prime contractors that are going to consider giving you a teaming agreement are going to 90% of the time want you to sign an exclusive agreement with them, because you're asking them to enter into a document that would guarantee you participation if they were successful, based on confidentiality and numbers that you may know in their bid proposal and other things. They probably are going to lean to you signing a exclusive agreement. But Depending on how bad they want the participation, I've seen guys be on 2 and 3 different teams. And sometimes it's just you have confidence in your number. You are willing to present your number to each team, and you really don't see the necessity of having a teaming agreement because you know you got the best number.
Well, I think what the question might be, so if I'm on this project in North Fort Worth, there's a completely separate project in Dallas. Can I be on a teaming agreement with somebody in North Fort Worth and a different teaming agreement with somebody in Dallas?
Oh yeah, you can be on 10 different teaming agreements at one time. Because as long as it's not a conflict of interest or breach of fiduciary responsibility to the team that you're working with, it's a commonly used tool in construction and in small business in general. And that's what I like about you guys' presentation. A lot of this we went over is not necessarily just applicable to construction. It's saying, I want to work for General Electric, and General Electric is a big company, and they require certain standards for you to work with them. And so to have $7 or $8 million of insurance versus you burning your premium up, you might bring another guy with you to where you could share that load and still compete for that General Electric work, even though it may not be construction related.
So Wendell, let me ask this, and then again, thinking about our audience. So if I'm looking to, from listening to you, I've learned a couple of things. One, you kind of get in where you fit in. If you're bigger, you may be better situated for a certain type of deal structure. But if you're smaller, you may get in at another spot, like a teaming agreement or something along those lines. So if I'm in the audience and I'm trying to, see, I want to get in where I can fit in, what would be your advice to these, our target audience, $10 million or less in revenue, 10 employees or less? And you talked about, there seems like a lot of industry expertise and knowledge. There seems like a big learning curve there. So those who want to get in, what is your, I know that's a very broad question, but sort of what is your advice in terms of action steps that they should take to position themselves? Because you've done this for 20 years, you've seen a lot. So this particular target audience who are looking to break into this area, what would you advise to put themselves in a good position to be able to take advantage of these opportunities?
Your best chance of success in business as a whole, and especially in the construction and engineering business, is increasing your capacity with current corporations that you work with that find you have an excellent track record with them. That is key, number one issue. If you have a good relationship with Walt Disney and they become your client, your number one objective is to serve that client well, because that client will then allow you to increase your capacity with them from 500,000 to 1 million to 2 million to 4 million. And 10 years later, you look up and you're doing 82 million Terminator 2 ride attraction. So that's how most business work. That's definitely how engineering and construction work, to do good work for good clients over a long period of time and increase the capacity of the type of work you do with them on a regular basis.
That makes sense. I want to take a chance to Billy, as you listen to all this and kind of looking at it through a legal lens, is there some texture you want to add through the legal lens that you think is worthy of mention?
Sure. Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Wendell, for this wonderful presentation. I think you've hit most of the key issues that you want to be thinking about when you're entering into these joint venture agreements or teaming agreements or partnership agreements. From a corporate lawyer perspective, I think one of the most important things you want to think about from a contracting perspective is, right, so what Wendell mentioned at the very beginning is these joint venture agreements, they're about sharing risks and rewards. And you need to know upfront just how much is being shared and in what proportions. And so that goes to a lot of questions that Wendell has talked about, right? One is how much are you owning? Let's assume that we're going into a single joint venture entity that is a new company. How much are you owning of that new company? And how often and how easily can you get your money out if you start turning a profit? Or what if you have a disagreement with the other side? How do you go about controlling this new entity that you have and making sure that you haven't lost control of the business that you run? So Wendell hit on many of these issues, but I think there are, what you need to keep at heart, right, is this idea of we're sharing risks and rewards, and we need to make sure that we're getting as much risk, as much reward as we can, and not taking on any risks that we don't have to. And so a good lawyer, right, will be able to advise you on precisely what sorts of rewards you should be getting for the efforts that you're putting out, and what sorts of risks you should be taking on and which ones you shouldn't. But they're all things, those are some of the key considerations that you want to think about ahead of time, because too often, I think in these contracting arrangements, you think about, oh, I really want to get this contract, I need to enter into it. And you don't think about, well, what happens if a year from now, me and my partner are disagreeing? We just do not like each other anymore. What happens then? And so it's not a comfortable conversation to have, but it's good to have it up front before you enter into a binding contract.
Window to that, and that's a good point, Billy. So window to that point, is that something you've seen? Because I mean, it's like always, it's kind of like a marriage where everybody thinks everything's going to be good, and then 3 years down the line, you're filing for divorce, and it's just messy and sticky. I mean, it's the same idea where you don't really look at the downside too carefully, and then when it happens, it just, I mean, my guess is you've seen a lot of that.
I've seen one that even took me for a loop. I had a partner, and he explained something to me really well. They were in the middle of a merger and acquisition. And he told me, the one thing you cannot put into any legal document is trust. If you don't trust the person you're working with to look out for your best interests, there's no legal document that's gonna put trust and compatibility. There's no such document. So you gotta have trust and a certain amount of compatibility to make any of these deals work. And as they were going through this merger, he explained something to me that if the merger fell apart or the deal didn't go through and their company got put at some type of financial risk, you in that joint venture are still responsible for finishing that project. So as William eloquently stated, as an attorney, you got to get good legal representation in engineering, construction, or any business, because there's just no way around it. Because anything can and will happen. We've seen this with the coronavirus. We've seen this with the uprisings. Nobody can plan for that. But it's a phenomenon that happened. There are a lot of projects going on right now. Some are going to make it, some aren't going to make it. But if you're in a joint venture and you made a commitment to an owner, regardless of what happens, somebody got to finish that job. So you have to assess your financial capability, the risks involved in that. Will there be alternative financing mechanism? Does the bond still hold indemnity for the joint venture, even though one of the entities went bankrupt? I mean, there's so many different factors. So I don't want anybody to go away from this taking this lightly, because people talk about all the good stuff that could happen, but nobody really talks about all the bad stuff that can happen. And you're still on schedules, you're still on requirements, and pandemics or anything else, some of these owners just don't care. They want to have their project done on time, on the budget, and that's just the life of the world they live in.
Thanks, Wendell. So Daryl, we're right up on the hour. I'm assuming you keep a tight ship here, and we roll up at 4 o'clock. Is that how we do it?
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. Well, if that's the case, I just want to say on behalf of the panel, Wendell, Billy, and Daryl, thanks for bringing this information. I know I learned a lot just listening to y'all. And
Denise, did we lose?
We might have lost him, but I enjoyed it. Any questions?
you just got to double check with
follow up,
Wendell.
and we'll stay in touch, guys.
Okay.
All
So
right.
So thank you all for participating, and Daryl, thanks for having Billy and myself, allowing us to get on you all's bandwidth and be a part of this project. So we appreciate it.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. This is what we do every Tuesday, and we thank you for your expertise and pulling everyone in. I think we got a lot of great information. I think there's more. I know there are more questions out there. So someone said I always leave them wanting more. So I'm sure everybody watches wanting some more. And I would ask them to go ahead and if you're on Facebook or you're online, go ahead and type in any questions that you have still, and we'll try to get them answered for you and get them back to you. We'll probably post them again on this recording within the next few days, because these recordings are last on our Facebook page on forthmetropolitanblackchamber.com. And so we can get that information back to you. And with that, again, we thank you, and I'm going to hand it back over to Denise so we can close this thing out. Denise, are you around there?
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today on our weekly webinar of the state of your business. We're here every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. We have always a lot of great information for you guys, and no matter what industry you're in. I feel like we touch on several different industries. So again, thank you to our panel for the great information. Like Daryl said, there was a lot of questions, but we'll get back to you on those. And I know that
feel free to email me.
one of the questions was actually that they wanted the PowerPoint presentation that you were going over. So if we can make that available to the public, that would be really great.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you. All right. And for all of you out there, if you are following us on social media, make sure to register for tomorrow's new member orientation if you're a new member. And with that, we'll leave you. We'll see you next Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. Thanks, Wendell, Daryl, Billy,
Take care.
Denise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right. All right. Everybody stay safe.
You too. Everybody wear a mask, okay?
Wear a mask. Absolutely.
All right, bye.